Florida Senator Marco Rubio joins us tonight with more. Sir, good to have you on. Thank you so much. Today's State Department officially accused Russia of committing war crimes in Ukraine. The statement reading in part, the U.S. government assesses that members of Russia's forces have committed war crimes in the country, in Ukraine. A lot of people are asking, what exactly does that mean? What will that mean for Russia? How impactful is that?
Well, first of all, I don't know what took them so long. I think there's already multiple other countries that have said it. Members of Congress have said it. I think it's unfortunately been typical of the Biden administration response to this, as they've been lagging. They've been reacting to pressure and statements from other countries or even members of Congress, even members of the Democratic Party in Congress. Now, what it means is, look, individuals who are responsible for war crimes can be charged in front of international tribunals, the International Criminal Court, and other elements. For violation of these treaties, by the way, that their countries are signatories to. There are rules of war, and targeting civilians in a war is a de facto. It is one of the definitions of a war crime. And so whoever gave that order, whoever carried out that order, is going to be responsible for that and can very well face justice for the rest of their lives.
And that'll have impact on a lot of people that operate inside that country, a lot of people close to the government, right?
Well, I think there's a lot of people, if you're wanted on international charges of war crimes, you really can't travel to many places because you're afraid that there'll be some red notice that'll have you arrested and brought before the tribunal.
That's interesting.
And you also don't know some future Russian government will turn you over.
Right, right. You know, Biden's European trip is in part an attempt to help to peel away Europe's reliance on Russian energy, which I think is something that's frustrated a lot of us over the last month. But we all know that this is the same administration that cannot seem to promote an increase in production here in the United States. They don't want to do that, no matter what they say or how they talk about it. They simply don't want to promote the increase in production that we would need. And the Saudis as well are not answering the phone calls of this administration. So how exactly are they going to formulate a way to increase energy production into Europe, pull them away from Russia? What can they do?
Well, it's exactly right. I mean, so on the one hand, Europe is in this bind because they bought into the Green New concepts, of the world, these global Green New deals. And so they said, we're not going to do any more nuclear, we're not going to do any more coal, we're going to rely on renewables, and we're going to buy natural gas from Russia. Well, it led them very dependent on Russia. And now that they want to break away from it, they find themselves in a tough spot. I think there's growing acknowledgement of how vulnerable they left themselves because they outran the technology. They simply can't do, you can't do a 21st century economy on renewables. The technology is not there. So it's ironic that a president who has made that a hallmark of his domestic agenda, I mean, that's basically what he's saying for the United States, is we need to stop relying on fossil fuels and start relying on renewables, and therefore is cracking down on the fossil fuel industry in this country, is going abroad and asking places like Saudi Arabia to produce more fossil fuels and asking countries like those in Europe to become more dependent on those new sources of fossil fuels as opposed to the natural gas from Russia.
But it seems like he's going to... It seems like he's going to need to get it from somewhere other than Saudi Arabia. It seems like the Saudis aren't really on board with this. Are there other resources they can tap? Because I don't know that he has any options.
Well, the U.S. has some export capacity. Actually, Ukraine has untapped capacity. Unfortunately, it's in the middle of a war. I mean, it won't be easy. But I think, frankly, I mean, Europe is has some of the most advanced nuclear technologies. They had nuclear power plants. They've walked away from that. That's a very clean source of energy. But again, it's not part of the Green New global deal. And so it's put them in a bind.
Yeah, nuclear somehow, for some reason, even though it doesn't emit much, it's very, very clean. They don't like nuclear for whatever reason. Putin is demanding so-called unfriendly countries use the ruble to buy Russian oil and gas. What exactly will that do?
Well, I think what's happening is that these sanctions are in place, and so they can't transact in any other currency. And so what he's basically saying is, you're not going to have, I'm not going to refuse to sell you oil, but you can only buy it if you pay me in my currency. And so, countries are going to say, well, we don't want to pay you in your currency because your currency is worthless. Plus, you'd have to buy their currency. You'd have to, in order to get rubles, you have to exchange it for some currency, a euro or a dollar. And he's desperate for both. So it's a combination of those two things. But I think ultimately what he's saying to these countries is, if you want oil, you better get rid of these sanctions that make it impossible for you to transact in dollars with us, because that's what he desperately wants.
Yeah. You tweeted this out today. Putin's need to create negotiating leverage means over the next 10-15 days, we face the growing possibility of Russia conducting chemical and or biological attack that they would try to blame on Ukraine and or NATO. Also cyber attack on United States banking, technology, and or energy sector. So obviously we have a very desperate dictator that's started a war that I don't think he anticipated turning out this way. these threats, where will that get him? If he makes a move like a biological, weapon or a chemical weapon, and he attacks the United States, what does that do? How does that help?
Well, I think he has to get himself into a situation where he thinks he has the upper hand in the war, so he can force Ukraine to accept an agreement where they demilitarize, where they give them they turn over Crimea and they turn over Donbass and other cities on the coast, and where they agree to become a neutral country and with no military. That he needs leverage to do that, and he's not going to be able to establish that leverage doing what he's doing now.
Right.
He's going to have to escalate, and he's run out of escalation options. At this point, his next escalation options are cyber attacks against the U.S. and some sort of horrific chemical and/or biological attack that he'll try to pose as something that the West did or that Ukraine has done, but something to make people really scared and say, gosh, we really need to put pressure on Ukraine to accept the deal now. This is getting out of hand. That's his mindset. There's the danger.
How do we respond if there's a cyber attack? I mean, we already had a Russian cyber attack last year. If there's another, what do you think happens?
Well, I think if there's a cyber attack, there has to be a proportionate response. Whatever he hits, we need to hit back. We have the capability to do that. He should know that already. That should have been made clear, I hope, with this administration, that this is what will happen to you if you do these things to us. That should be abundantly clear. As far as chemical and biological, I think it obviously depends. It depends on those things are difficult to contain. Right, you may, especially depending on what it is that they do, these things could easily cross borders and impact NATO troops. Then we're in a whole different world. Let's just hope that doesn't happen, because it creates a lot of uncertainties about what the response would be.
Certainly would. Want to close on Ketanji Brown Jackson. Obviously, we've been watching this the last couple of days. Everybody's been seeing it on TV all day. There will be a full Senate vote at some point. Seems pretty clear. Your thoughts on this nominee?
Well, I haven't watched the entirety of it. I've watched pieces of it. I can say this. She's been treated with a lot more respect and dignity than what was given Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett. They turned those hearings into an absolute circus. No one's out there to try to smear her or defame her. She's being asked tough questions, as she should be. She's a 51-year-old that's going to be on the court for 3 decades. My kids will be my age by the time that she comes off the court in the future. She's going to have an important, pivotal role to play in the years to come. This is an important position. She should get asked tough questions about her record, about her stance on issues and the like. And I think it's being done in a very respectful way, unlike what you see the media people going nuts because she's being asked tough questions. They think this should just be an easy process. These are the same media people that take pride in vetting presidential candidates and asking ridiculous questions of them. But when it comes to a nominee for the Supreme Court on the left, they think you really shouldn't ask any tough questions of them. I frankly, I'm happy to see that we're back to a normal status in the end of how these hearings are held. But in the end, for me, a decision is going to be based on whether or not she is someone that understands that her job is to interpret the Constitution, not to make public policy, and to interpret it according to its original meaning. And I have doubts whether she'll be able to fulfill that requirement of mine.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of questions about her ideologies. We've seen a lot of that the last couple of days. Senator Marco Rubio, we appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.